All right, everyone, we're going to get started with this webinar. First and foremost, thank you so much for joining us. You're here to attend our webinar focused on how MSPs can boost their profits with Windows Virtual Desktop and a general discussion we want to have around WVD, where it works, where its differences are with RDS, and the real value this brings to our channel partners. So quickly, I'd like to run a little bit of introduction, if that's okay with everybody. Introduce myself. I'm Michael Slater. I am a subject matter expert on a couple of things here. I'm also in charge of our corporate pre-sales team. So I feature a lot on the enablement and technical understanding of our partners, making sure they're up to date, they have the best information, the best possible service. I'm also joined by one of my Azure experts. So his name is Nicholas Bouchard. He's here as well. We're very lucky to have him. He's one of my best guys on the subject, and he works a lot with WVD. So he will be my gooseberry for the sake of this conversation. We'll be talking, having a conversation back and forth, and he'll also be helping answer some of your questions at the very end of the webinar, as we do plan to have a 15-minute Q&A if people do stick around.
Hello, Michael. Hello, everyone.
Hey, Bushi. So real quick, because we know that this is a webinar that's not just about our existing partner program, it's also those that are looking. So we included a quick slide just to kind of describe who we are. So we're a cloud solutions provider with lots of years experience in the channel, lots of experience in the market. We've been doing cloud solutions since web hosting was the way to go. Obviously, that's evolved from other products and other things, all the way from hosted Exchange now into Office 365 and a bunch of other cloud solutions, including infrastructure as a service, telecommunications, and security. We're actually well over 700 employees now. We're actually closer to the 1,000 mark nowadays. We've actually been growing through COVID, which we're a bit blessed and lucky to have. And we have about 60,000 clients that operate through our structure and our partner network. So we've taken on the Azure challenge here at Sherweb. Our big focus has been, how can this product, when delivered correctly, become a boon? We understand that it's very intimidating. It's a hard thing to pick up IaaS or any kind of infrastructure service. We understand that, the original challenge of like Windows Small Business Server, that was a challenge back in the day. And we understand these challenges continue to come. So at Sherweb, we really built a system here that really focuses how partners of any size can get started with Sherweb and start selling enterprise-grade solutions to their SMB clients utilizing our partner program. So we got tons of experts. Nikki himself has a couple certifications. We have team members that have certifications up to the 300 level of Microsoft, so that would be the architect level certifications. Marketing specialists, pre-sales teams. We have lots of clients, lots of experience in infrastructure. We've been doing it for quite a long time across different clouds. In our humble little home Canada, we are one of the top rated for this particular product line, and we have won a series of really cool rewards, everything from our ability as an MSP ally down to our cloud infrastructure programs, and really focus on what we're talking about today with Azure or other IaaS products. So the agenda is to cover what is Windows Virtual Desktop, what are the benefits and opportunities, what does reselling this product look like, some of our specific Sherweb partner offers that we pass down to our channel, and again, a quick Q&A. We'd like to discuss everything Windows Virtual Desktop or answer any of your questions about IaaS in general with our expert over here. So first thing, I want to talk about a little bit about what actually is Windows Virtual Desktop and why it's becoming a critical part of the stack for our MSP partners. As we all know, everyone's living a very unique experience where I would say years of digital transformation is happening at a pace of a month, maybe even a quarter. So in a time where businesses, months ago would have said, I can never work from home, I can never ever imagine not having a workforce that I can visibly see. We've now gotten the world where Teams has exploded, 1,000% overuse from what it was a year ago. We now have Windows Virtual Desktop becoming the default for a lot of people. The amount of quotations we're doing on our team for reserved instances to reduce the costs, it's been absolutely insane. So we're in a new market where you really have to be able to offer this, because people aren't going to be buying on-prem servers for very much longer. We think that's got a couple year lifespan. Everything's going cloud. As we scale and get better with this technology, it's only going to become more inexpensive and more user-friendly. So now is the perfect time, and why MSPs needed to consider adding this to their stack today. So real quick, we'll cover what Windows Virtual Desktop is, and I'll get a little bit of help from my friend Nick as well too as we describe this. So Windows Virtual Desktop is a native app virtualized service that runs in the cloud. So it has all the standard clouds, right? Always up to date, always optimized, and ready to deploy and scale. Maybe not necessarily minutes, depending on your configuration, what you need. It might take a little bit longer than that, but it definitely happens very quickly. So, Mr. Bucci, it's actually my first thing I want to talk to you about. How long do these deployments usually take when we do look at Windows Virtual Desktop?
Depending on the tool you use, if it's done manually, that can take a bit longer, as you mentioned, so a few hours of work to do all the required configuration. But if you rely on the tools such as Nerdio, then you can have a very quick configuration. Everything is automated. You only need to select the services that you require, and then you proceed with the deployment. And usually within a few hours of hands-off work, then you get the a fully optimizing configure environment for WVD.
Excellent. And we'll actually be touching on Nerdio later, so let's keep that in the back of our minds as we kind of push forward.
Absolutely.
So the benefits are pretty clear. User experience, all the security features, again, because we can connect back into a lot of the advanced security features within M365. Simplified management, right? Because we're talking about virtualizing and setting everything up from one vendor, one solution, not multiple. And the superior economics, right? So multi-session Windows 10 experience, really only available through Windows Virtual Desktop. It's much easier for us to deploy, much easier to maintain, and the ongoing costs, because it's all rolled into your licensing, are much easier. You're not messing with CALs or any of these other ways they used to license remote desktop products. We're looking at something that's really natively supported and simply priced for the most part. Another part that's great is, of course, the partner ecosystem, right? So Microsoft is a partner-focused organization, especially with what they do with us. They're scale partners, right? That includes their whole channel. So you get a lot of resources from them as a vendor that you don't simply won't be able to get at other shops that offer a similar type of service. So native Windows Virtual Desktop has a very high level architecture we can describe. So you can use Active Directory for identity management. We can provide virtualization of the infrastructure, deploy and manage virtual machines on your Azure subscription. So again, you set the customer up, they have their own subscription, we get them running. And we can manage using existing tools. So things like Intune, right? If we're looking at protecting endpoint devices, whether it be a laptop or a PC or anything else that's broken into this entire system. And we could easily connect, right? Using a lot of the hybrid AD and a lot of the hybrid features of Microsoft, these different solutions together. So you can have a solution that's not entirely cloud, but also not entirely on-prem, but a mix of both very easily using WVD. Any notes you want to add on there, Nikki?
Yeah, definitely. So as you can see on the right there, there's a good chunk of the usual RDS stack that is managed by Microsoft. So that is already one of the biggest advantage that you get with the WVD. So you simplify your environment and you offload to Microsoft a portion of the management of the maintenance that you would have to do if you were to manage a regular RDS environment.
Excellent. So next up, we're quickly review the benefit and opportunity. So really focus mostly on the things that you get from positioning and what the opportunity can be. So when we look at the opportunities and the type of people who usually buy this, or let's say maybe even the verticals you would look at, there's really largely 4 people that have very specific needs that we worry about. So number one is customers that have a security and regulation aspect. So for instance, if you want to be FIS compliant, right? If you have to worry about HIPAA, if you need to comply with any kind of governmental or non-gov standards, right? If you have a compliancy, WVD is one of the best ways to ensure that, right? Because the high level of security attached to the product and the ability to tightly control within Azure the security parameters of your virtual machines, right? Again, unprecedented level enterprise security deployed down to SMB clients. Another thing this will work well is for elastic workforces, right? So short-term employees, contractors, any kind of M&A situation that's occurred. We know that we have customers in our portfolio that are seasonal, for example. So they have a lot of workers at a set time of year. Let's say an accounting firm, right? So they tend to add in contractors to deal with overflow around tax season, but they need to remove them plus all the secure data at the end of that time and make sure that there's no potential liability they might have. So that's a very common case we see is with CPAs utilizing this type of solution. Another example is like specific employees. So situations where you have bring your own device. So you have guys that are contracted out and we say, hey, look, here's your virtual machine. Use whatever you have home to connect to it, right? We're not going to pay for any additional devices for you. It just doesn't make economic sense. And we don't want to manage it afterwards, right? Can be great for call centers, branch workers, any kind of place that has a specific use case that involves a lot of blended working environments. We know right now a lot of people are just 100% remote, but eventually as they would go back, we're likely going to have a hybrid workforce. And this is where something like WVD comes into play. Another thing we have is specialized workloads. So for example, if you're looking at the investment it takes to get a single computer running AutoCAD, that can be very, very, very expensive depending on what's happening. And if you have to buy these machines, it's absolutely insane. Like maybe you don't particularly want to do it that way. Maybe you want to look something a little bit cheaper. So this is a fantastic way to kind of avoid those classic capital expense got-yous and move everything into an operating expense that you can kind of quickly predict month over month. So that's a great way to kind of look at this approach and say, hey, what a way to work it out. And of course, there's a classic reason why cloud computing became so popular. That's software development use, right? So be able to have a scaling machine to produce work and run your programs on is a benefit of the cloud. That's why a lot of people have bought that. I mean, that's why the incumbents in the market have gotten so big today. It's definitely a big part of it. We understand not a lot of MSPs have these particular clients. A lot of those don't fit the business model for MSPs necessarily, but it is an opportunity you could potentially have, and these clients are worth the gold mine. It's almost like buying a lottery ticket, right? If you invest into the right company that's doing this kind of software development and they take off, their usage could scale through the roof. Imagining being someone that early on had partnered with Uber. That's the kind of methodology we apply to software dev loads. Nothing to understand is that the desktop as a service market is growing. It's a 32.1% compounded annual rate. If anyone here is good with finance, we know that's the best type of interest you could have. The DaaS revenue is forecast to be about $3 billion, and 50% of VDI users will be deployed on these platforms by, I guess, 2019. So you probably already hit that point. Again, it's really, really, really a time to start getting involved in these things as these things scale out. We just understand that there's always the bleeding edge or the early adopter phase, right? And then we cross over the chasm, which is when something goes from something early adopters and forward-thinking innovators use to becoming a standard product. I think we're fast approaching that chasm or that gap very, very quickly when it comes to desktop as a service. And now's a fantastic time given the current economic and political environment to get into that. The opportunity to create a high demand desktop as a service offer within Windows, again, is almost boundless, right? So the way that we look at it right now, it's a way for kind of our partners to not just know their current world or to kind of have a business today, it's also a way to adapt something for the future. So there's a lot of ways you can monetize this, Windows Virtual Desktop hosting, right? And you can even start out of your own IP, which is something that we always recommended Microsoft solutions. We understand that nobody really makes money selling Microsoft. That's not the way the ecosphere is built, right? The idea here is you have to add your own value. If you're an MSP, it could be managed services, but it could be a lot of your own IP you lay over it. For example, people will add modernization, managed services, all these kind of different features. So partner, it's not just really selling the Azure or just the programs within Office 365, they're really selling an entire modern desktop, right? Something that's larger than the components themselves to create a bigger image and a better value for the client. So that's what we're big fans of here, and that's what we think that should be a big part of what gets featured. As far as it goes for sales scenario, 3 useful things you can keep in mind as you approach these deals with customer is that there's really 3 what we consider to be triggered sales scenarios. So triggered meaning that it happens because of an outside force that affects both you and the customer rather than through lead generation, cold calling, or some other kind of sales-based activity. This is need driven. So one of those is to replace or migrate on-prem solution. So as things break, that's always an opportunity to have this discussion, especially on-premise servers. This is classically what we're used to, right? So the pitch here is very easy. It's migration of workloads, reducing the complexity, and enhancing the security, right? They might pay a little bit more in the long run depending on what their outlook is. But again, the classic argument is you need to maintain servers. It can be very, very expensive. And if those things break, what's the cost of that downtime? Just the standard cloud model we've been pitching for years now. Another thing is provide new Windows virtualization. So again, right now, this is perfect. So as employees are being hired, people are having logistical problems provisioning, getting hardware ready, right? Again, with the restrictions due to COVID, people can't just run to the office and grab a laptop and start working tomorrow. We need to have something a little bit more long-term here, something that's scalable and again is safe. So this is where Windows Virtual Desktop modernization can occur immediately at point of sale. So you can use this tactic to convert existing clients and get them on board right away. The last part is something that we know our channel has dealt with a lot. It's the Windows 7 end of support, right? So we know we've extended through CSP for another at least 2 or 3 years, again, with escalating prices, right? So it's getting more and more and more expensive every year. It'll continue to go up in price. If the customer doesn't want to continue to pay for that, and again, it can be a pretty big capital expense depending on how many machines they have running, this is a great way to save, right? Get them into the cloud right away, and we can look at reducing those costs, right? So no longer eating that giant capital expense every year. And again, it's going to escalate, and eventually it's going to go away no matter what. So we can use this as a selling point to have the conversation today. So most customers are already eligible for Windows Virtual Desktop. So it's something that they could do. And actually, Nick, this is funny because this is a conversation that me and you have had. Remind me what that scenario used to get a lot. People really under the impression that they got a free desktop in the cloud with M365. It was you telling me this, right?
Yep. This is a common, I would say, understanding that people have from the Microsoft 365 bundles that you can get. You do get Windows 10 included, whether it is Windows 10 Business or Windows 10 Enterprise, which is the what you could call the licensing part for the for your virtual desktop in the cloud. After that, all you need is a few virtual machines to run those services required, and you are completely following Microsoft terms and conditions that way.
Perfect. Completely agree. But keep in mind that there are people, though, and part of the confusion is that they do get access to some of the stuff they might need to do. So the eligibility really refers to just the licensing, right? So just the single OS license. That's what people always have to focus on. Not get too confused and think that they're going to have an automatic desktop available right away. Might be in the roadmap. You never know. As technology gets cheaper, I think maybe that's even a direction that the whole world could go in, right? You have a desktop that's persistent in the cloud and follows you everywhere you go, but we're not quite there yet. So you still need to buy some licensing and pay for some specific Azure usage. So next part we're going to talk about is more of the sales scenarios. Again, really easy to touch on. It's the removal of servers and kind of transitioning into something that's more on-prem. So this is an interesting part because we're talking a little bit more about the RDS versus VDI component. So there's a couple things that you will get when you migrate that you won't get otherwise, and vice versa. So it's in short, it's basically something we need to evaluate on a case-by-case basis, which is why we do have a pre-sales team that's available, and that is one of the Sherweb benefits. So we're more than happy to have a discussion to review all these things, right? Because with IaaS, there's so many factors, and it really is a back and forth discussion you need to have, right? With your partner, which in your case would be Sherweb, and the end user to understand the needs, right? Because there are ways you can kind of cut costs and save money. There are ways that you can't. It's really hard to create a one-size-fits-all solution. Would you agree with that, Nick?
Absolutely. This is probably the biggest challenge for, let's say, new partners that want to offer WVD. It is an amazing solution, but because it does so many things and there's so many possibilities with it, you can't just say, I want to create one size fit all offering and I want to offer for this much. This is not going to work because you have to adjust it for the specific needs of each of your customers. At the same time, this is the whole point that conversation is not so much of a, I would say, a roadblock. It's actually an opportunity to have conversation about their whole IT infrastructure, and then you can that way dig out more than one opportunity. That can be about endpoint security, that can be about a file service, that can be about, let's say, just the Office suite and so on. So there's a lot of conversation to be had, and that way there's a lot of opportunity that can just spring up on their own that way.
Yeah, totally agree. So next up, this thing specifically we want to talk about is actually two different scenarios. So kind of what it would be the two classic examples. So we have use case one, use case two. So because the session hours really matter, there's something we look at, right? So can you actually explain the multi-session concept for me a little bit, Mr. Bouchard? Like why it matters in Windows Virtual Desktop?
It is a very important concept in the sense that you already get this with RDS, which is Windows Server, but then with WVD you can also do the same for Windows 10 Enterprise, and it reduces your overhead per end user because you only need a computer to run the software, the OS once, and then all you need is a little bit more computer to run each of the virtual desktop, greatly reducing the cost for the overall infrastructure. So for companies that were looking in the cloud that needed, let's say, Windows 10 or Windows 7, that is a huge opportunity for them to finally make the move, because now it is becoming a lot more affordable than it used to be.
Definitely. Because again, that's a key part that we always talk about, right? Where it's the multi-session really is important. This can help reduce some of the cost depending on your setup. This is a clear example where it really can benefit, right? Especially when you move from a third-party solution into something that's native. So it actually is an opportunity to tailor something to a completely different market or need. So now we'll talk a little bit about new virtualization. So these are kind of like brand new, net new clients, what's going on there. So the classic positioning is pretty easy. The way that we might think about you doing it is to just roll this into your managed service fees, right? So if you add a fee instead of line iteming it, this is a better way to take the approach. So your customers are going to see one set price per month based off the number of seats, which then kind of has a better communication. And again, because if in the stack you're using, if you can see a little bit to the left, all the different components like that are within there. For example, you have the sign for Office, you have the sign for Windows, the sign for Advanced Threat Protection, and all those other kind of different components that are within Microsoft's ecosphere. By combining that all into one package bundle, and that is one of the beautiful parts of it, right? Again, this does also assume a certain amount of RI being involved, and RI is an entirely different conversation that we are hearing a lot about, especially in context of the current economic issues that the world is facing. But yeah, just utilizing existing licensing, we can really bundle something that's going to be very cost effective and just gets rolled into the managed service fee. So really, it's you're adding in your help desk services, you're adding in your security services, you're adding your collaboration, your VoIP, any other components you might be selling through Sherweb. And we add in the managed service fee in the desktop, so you're really offering an entire desktop as a service package, right? Where you're doing total IT almost at that point. And again, depending on your reach, maybe you're even supplying the micro or slim clients as well too. There's a limitless amount of you can monetize in the way of values you can take, and the ways you can be clever to add this into your existing line card of MSP offerings. So one of the key takeaways we get from here is one of the ones that we've harped on, right? So the only way to deliver Windows 10 experience at a multi-session cost, right? So again, where we have that many simultaneous sessions, this is really the best way to look at it. It really is a better option for economic on-premise virtual desktop deployments and replacements for migration. So one of those situations are very good. Again, we removed the EOL issue for Windows 7, and it gives a fantastic gateway into another managed service offering, right? We understand that not everybody's there yet, and we know that if we were to consider level one of the transformation to MSP to be the adoption of 365, we definitely think that taking on Azure would be level two, right? It's a much more complex product, and it really is a sign of your readiness to embrace digital transformation and to go from being a break fix or an MSP into a business transformation leader, right? Which is something else I've been talking about, another one of my webinar series I've been hosting as of late. So Nikki, what do you feel is like a sign that someone's ready to finally take this dive? Like the most MSPs that you deal with, what are some successful traits they've had to show that they're ready to start having the Windows Virtual Desktop conversation?
The fact that they already have a sort of infrastructure in place to manage their customer services, but that they realize that they need what I would call a core offering, so that they can tie in all of their other offers. And WVD is exactly that. It is a flagship that you can present to your customers, virtual desktop, to which you can then bring in a lot of more of your services and offering, which is where you have your best markup. So customers are often, I would say partners are often looking at this as a way to get their feet in the water, just to start getting used to the product, and that way they can start offering it to their customers, because that way it's an easy product to offer. People know the name, they want it, and it's a lot easier after that to offer you the rest of your business book, because it will simply follow WVD with the afterward.
Excellent, totally agree. Because it's really it really is an evolution, right? So you need to be really prepared for it. I think you touched on some fantastic points, Nikki, about like the preparedness you have to be there. So now we'll take a look at some of the specific offers that we have. I'm kind of getting you all set up and ready to go. So we talked a little bit about Nerdy already. We actually have a couple more slides dedicated to it, but now it's a great time for you to kind of consider changes, looking at new products, looking at new options. I understand that some people have lost customers. Some people are in a situation where they need to find ways to get new ones. Adding a new product might potentially be that. So we say, use some of our tools, go through our documentation, go into our partner toolbox. We got a bunch of stuff that'll help you out. We have some great toolkits working with Nerdio, right? Which again is a real easy way for SMBs and SMB providers in the MSP space to get Windows Virtual Desktop up and running quickly and efficiently in a cookie cutter model for the most part, right? So you have all sorts of like cost calculators for the cost of Windows Virtual Desktop, platform reviews, we have presentation and pitch decks, which you can use, things much like what we're talking about right now, solution briefs, white papers, pricing and solution guides, technical FAQs, right? Plus, you always have access to my team as well, too. You can also get, from this kit, which is going to be fantastic, you'll get a Nerdy for Enterprise 90-day free trial. Again, free trials are all the rage right now. Plus, you get access to our security assessment, which is something that we're using to kind of pitch security focus in our MSPs when it comes to addressing maybe the holes in the armor of their clients. So we highly advise you guys go grab that. Take a look at that URL, info.sherweb.com/Windows Virtual Desktop Toolkit, and you can pick up what you need from there. Now, we do want to quickly talk about Nerdio, which is, again, our preferred client when it comes to tools that enable our partners. There's always something special I find about Nerdio as a vendor. We're big fans of dealing with them only because they come from an MSP background, right? Originally, their company started just as a managed service provider. They developed some IP, like we talked about in the model before, and they wrapped in a solution that helps you really easily administrate and deploy Windows Virtual Desktop at scale. So it's a great way to kind of get started. You can set up a basic situation quickly, Windows Virtual Desktop in like 60 seconds, right? So, you know, Windows 10 multi-session, really simple profile management, simplified licensing, and again, a couple of clips to this very intuitive portal. It's easy to do. There is somewhat the challenge we get, and Microsoft is getting better and better every day. It is hard to work within the portal unless you are a PowerShell expert. This kind of removes the need for you to have that level of expertise, and you can automate a lot of this into the foreground, and this can become a simple task. So instead of hiring a PowerShell expert, which, you know, is not going to be particularly cheap to find and hard to find in this very in-demand world for IT techs, you can then substitute this with like a level 1 guy in your help desk or an outsourced help desk, just utilizing Nerdio as a platform to get these things up and running. So there's a lot of value in there. Anything else you throw in for Nerdio, Mr. Bouchard?
Yeah, I love Nerdio because if a partner is looking to start to getting some experience with WVD and they have some what I would call very standard cases, so let's call them a out of the box, so an identity service, a file service, and then one or a few host machines. Nerdio will deliver that with excellence in the sense that their scripts are designed to do this. They follow Microsoft best practices. If you want to do RDS, if you want to do Windows 10 multi-sessions, it's a simple drop-down menu to change, as the slide is saying, with just a few clicks. You select the services that you need. You can VPN gateway. You can include backups, and everything is pre-configured for you. And that way you can start onboarding some of your customers that have very standard needs to WVD, get used to the product, and then later on you can attack the more customized needs of your customers. So some customers they might not be able to fit within the Microsoft best practices templates or architectures. Once you have more experience with WVD and Nerdio, that's when you can start deploying them, maybe using the Azure portal directly. And as we know, this is WVD v1, so version 1. It is still a kind of a rough product, if you want to put it this way. Microsoft has already announced a version 2 that should be released in a few months, so that will ease the deployment. But right now is the perfect time to start getting used to this because you're getting a headway compared to your competitors. It means that it shows that you are a mature partner and that you're not afraid to look into the new technology. You want to be one of the leaders, and that's what Nerdio allows a partner to do.
Excellent. Totally agree, Bushi. Totally agree. And I also, as well as for this program, we're going to be adding a lot of content into Windows Virtual Desktop as part of our plan. So we are going to have some stuff where we'll even help walk people through this. Microsoft also continually offers training in this. We had a great team up with the US. I think you attended that training, right, Mr. Bouchard, where we had Nerdio and Microsoft present some more advanced Azure concepts in conjunction for Windows Virtual Desktop. So there's lots of reach tools out there. Microsoft is really looking to push this to the forefront. So if you're looking to get on this train, the amount of support you receive will, I think, be really useful and really help you guys get started right away. So big focus. Again, we look at getting this thing done for Azure rapidly as quickly as possible. What makes it really good is a summary of like these 5 concepts. So deployment, price, packaging, managing, and optimization, right? So using all the tools we provide to you, you can quickly get an offering up into your product stack for your MSP offer, quickly get it to market, and quickly do the process of migration. So again, there's lots of great tools. You get free onboarding with Nerdio. They have a go live engineer that can help you get set up and working on your new clients' workloads as soon as possible. We highly recommend them, and we think that they're a key thing for people that maybe have that little shred of doubt and they're 100% sure if they're ready to take that dive yet, but now they can, utilizing a great tool like Nerdio. So a lot of the stuff that you get there, I would say to summarize the three things is you get access to pre-sales, you get access to the Nerdio Secure Score, you get access to the cost estimator as well too. So you can get access to all these things today, get started, get working with it, and it allows you to kind of get ready for a lot of what if situations, consider the price savings of reserve instances, get an idea of where you can work on your cybersecurity posture, getting ready, because a lot of Nerdio is designed by MSPs, so they understand the security need. A lot of features are built into there, and just get set up and ready to go. Take the dive. We highly advise you do it. And again, with partnership combo like Nerdio and Sherweb, you're sure to succeed. So really quickly, if you guys want to do me a favor, if you'd like to get started, get going, get the virtual desktop kit, get that 90-day trial and the go live engineer, take that security assessment. We'd love for you to enter WVD in the comment box below. It'd be a fantastic way for you to get started and work together for us to build you a better business for the future. Also, if you're interested, we do host a Azure Insight series with a bunch of different talks, a bunch of different panelists. We have people from in the industry as vendors. We have conversations with other MSPs talking about they've been successful monetizing Azure services. It's always a bunch of different topics, and it really is more of a podcast format. I highly suggest you guys go out there and take a look. I think there's a lot of value in that content for people looking for a little bit of thought leadership on the subject. So please take a quick look. Let us know what you think. We'd welcome your feedback. So we're about 10 minutes out of schedule, which is fantastic. So now we'd like to open the floor for any questions or comments or anything at all we'd like to talk about. We'd really like to get some of your insights and maybe answer some questions if anything's popped up.
Cool. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Pretty good. Yourself?
I'm great. I'm great. So I do have a question. There was one question. If when you were talking about the Office licenses, there was a bit of confusion there. So they want to know if you can maybe explain that or expand that a bit, saying that if you have the M365 license, you are set up to have WVD, but what is the other things that are missing for it to actually happen?
No problem. That's actually a fantastic question, Mr. Bouchard, as he just has this conversation quite regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have, let's say, Microsoft 365 Business Premium, so you have not only the Office suite that you can use an RDS or WVD environment, you also get the Windows 10 Business, which is a kind of a toned down enterprise version that you can use in the multi-version or a multi-user environment of WVD. After this, you simply need, let's say, 2 virtual machines, a small one that would run your identity service, so Active Directory in Azure, and a second one, probably a little bit larger, depending on the amount of end users that you have, and that way you can run Windows 10. Each end user will already have their license so that they can properly use the environment or the virtual machines. And then all you have to do is that you need to do that extra configuration for the 2 virtual machines to be able to talk with the WVD, let's call it gateway, and that way leverage that amazing service that Microsoft has designed and made available for us.
Awesome,
Excellent.
great. Okay, I do got another question here. And this one's coming. It's from Marcel. Can you spin down a WVD instance to reduce the cost of a seasonal basis?
I'm sorry, the cost of a what?
Seasonal basis. So basically, if they're only using it for a certain season, can they reduce the cost?
Oh, absolutely. Say, this is Azure, so IaaS, you have full control over your virtual machines, and a virtual machine that is shut down does not incur cost. The only thing you would be paying for is, let's say, the storage, but that is a tiny portion of the cost of a VM. So you don't pay for the compute. You can obviously scale down, or you can shut it down completely. So if there's no requirement for this, you have a dormant environment. If there's a need, then you simply boot up those virtual machines again, and you use them as if they had never been shut down. And in the meantime, you don't get charged for this. So you can greatly reduce your costs in between your busy time of the year.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give you a little scenario. This one's coming from Noel. He says a small office like a CPA with 10 windows, 10 desktop users, and a central file server. They currently use G Suite. How do you make business case for WVD and Microsoft 365?
This is actually I would say a fairly easy business case if they're looking to remove their footprint of a, let's say, hardware on site. Then WVD is definitely the route to go. You have a very, I would say, simple environment because you don't need the full RDS stack, so less maintenance, less risk of having to troubleshoot the environment. And on top of that, you get extra security from Microsoft, because what you need to understand is on a technical level, the end user never talks directly with the virtual machine. It talks first with the WVD gateway, which then talks with the virtual machine itself. And this added security means that anybody that wants to get through to your data, for example, needs first to get through Microsoft line of defense, and that is a very difficult task to do, especially compared to, let's say, an on-prem deployment.
Thank you very much. Now, since you mentioned RDS, a lot of questions that I've got in the past before were like, between WVD and RDS, which one is better?
Without a doubt, WVD, you could think of WVD as RDS 2.0. So WVD is a different approach to deliver virtual desktop to remote users, and WVD allows you to do both RDS, so Windows Server for multiple users, or Windows 10 again for multiple users. So depending on the need of, let's say, of their specific software or not, if they just need Windows 10 desktop, WVD give you all that flexibility. You can have both in the same environment. So going WVD is, even in its infancy state at the moment, is a much better service than you would get compared to regular RDS, and that's without considering all the security advantage that we just discussed.
Great. I got another question from Ray. Can WVD be deployed without using on-prem AD server in a hybrid with Azure, essentially just using Azure ADDS?
Totally. While it is still possible to have an hybrid environment, setting up a VPN tunnel and all, this is not a requirement. You can be fully cloud-based. You can have just a few virtual machines in the cloud. Obviously, a VPN tunnel is still a possibility. It adds security and so on for the connections, but there's no requirements at all to have any hardware. When we're talking here, obviously servers and the such, you still need routers and etc. for the networking, but server-wise, you don't need anything on-prem. And this is why WVD is such a great offering for, let's say, smaller companies, which usually the cost of buying and maintaining a single server is so expensive. Moving all of that to the cloud and paying monthly Microsoft for one of the best services in the world is definitely a no-brainer for a lot of SMBs.
Thank you very much. Another question here. This one's talking about scalability. So how large and how small does WVD scale?
Almost as small as you need it, and I would say pretty much as large as you want it as well, in a sense that Azure has a lot of series or families of virtual machine. You can get some very small machines. Some of them you have, let's say, partial access to the CPU, so they have very low cost. We can think about, let's say, $30 per month for a virtual machine that is plenty to run your Active Directory. While if you have very demanding software, or if you have a large user base, you can get machines that has 8 vCPU, 64 gigs of RAM, and that will run your workload without any problem. And in a case of, let's say, varying workload, you can change them manually based on your requirements, or you can even leverage some of Azure automation, so that if the system sees that you have more end user at the moment, it could spin up new virtual machines so that those end users would land on those machines instead of having one single machine that gets overloaded by too many sessions.
Thank you very much. Like speaking of machines, like now if you're in if I give you a scenario where there were like 10 users, for example, and you install an application on one of those test desktops, will it show up on all the others like it
Absolutely.
does in
So
RDS?
yeah, exactly the same thing in the sense that you install the software on the what you could call the core machine, so the operating system, and then any desktop that is generated by that machine will give access to the software for the end users. So this is where you get the most saving for a company, in the sense that instead of a before WVD, if you wanted to do Windows 10, you had to go what you would call VDI, so a single end user per machine, and then obviously you have this overhead that you need to run Windows 10 multiple times, so you have to pay for that compute. WVD allows you to run a single instance of Windows 10, but then have multiple users running their desktop on that same machine.
Awesome. I got a question about Nerdio. This one is, what is the functional difference between Nerdio offering and the native WVD control management system? So the question is pretty much, what is the value added by Nerdio?
This is a great question, because right now WVD is really like, let's say, stage number one, in a sense that there's no portal, there's no GUI or automation available from Microsoft. It's either you get their scripts, and then you spend the time required to configure your sessionals or your Active Directory so that it can talk with the portal. It can be done. Definitely doing it is great because you get the experience, and if there's ever a need, you can do it manually. But the point of Nerdio is that if you're not there yet and you're already starting to get some demand for WVD, and you obviously don't want to say no because you're waiting another 6 or 12 months to get your staff trained, you can start deploying WVD within a few hours after just doing a basic scoping, making sure that their needs will fit within the Nerdio template. And after that, the system will take care of not only the deployment and the configuration of the virtual machines themselves, so the proper templates that you selected, the server roles for required, but also the configuration so that those virtual machines can talk to the WVD gateway itself.
Awesome. And just to make sure that everybody understands is that when Nerdio is actually connecting to their Azure account, right?
Exactly. So as a manager of the Nerdio system, you can manage all of your customers in there, and you simply connect their Nerdio tenant to their Azure and Office 365 tenants. So Nerdio will talk to their, let's say, their Azure subscription, and will tell the Azure system deploy this and this and this machine with those configuration and so on. And that's why you don't have to take care of that.
Perfect. I'm just going through the questions right now. So this one's from Donna. So how does this work with, say, Microsoft Access deployments where users run the app locally but point to the data on the server? How would this work in this scenario if everything was virtualized and having the access data on the server?
Yes, it is a very, I would say, standard or common form of deployment where you have your data files in the cloud. It can be directly on the same virtual machine. So if you have a basic environment, it could be on the sessionals or the host machines if it's Windows 10, or you can have it on a different machine, like let's say on the file service machine, where it would be accessible for, by the other virtual machines if you have more than one sessionals, for example. So that software would simply be pointed to that data file that is located somewhere else, and that would allow you to maximize the, let's say, maximize the use of those software in the cloud.
Awesome. So I got another question about, should we jump in now about WVD or wait? So basically, Ray's asking, would it be worthwhile to wait for WVD 2.0? I'm assuming that's like waiting for Microsoft to catch up with some GUI interface to make it easier, or just jump in right now. And if they jump in right now, would it be easy to migrate to this new release?
That is actually a Really, really good question, because there's no point in trying to force the adoption of WVD if there's no need to. Again, the goal of using Nerdio is kind of to elevate that situation. You can wait, definitely, if none of your customers are interested or their needs doesn't fit what Nerdio can offer, and your staff is not yet trained properly so that you can deliver a high quality deployment for your customers, you should wait. But again, if waiting is a decent option, but it doesn't give you the experience that later on when you're going to be comparing with others provider, obviously customers might not ask you directly when did you start offering Nerdio or NWVD, but they will probably be able to tell when they talk to your staff compared to the staff at the other provider that some of them are a lot more used to the product, and some of them might, as you know, human beings, they might even brag about how difficult it was at first and how easy it is. If your staff hasn't been through that boot camp in a way, customer will know right away, and that might be an advantage that you're giving away to some of your competitors.
Thank you very much. So one question was asked by Marcel is, so each WVD is generated based on the login and then customized to fit the user?
In short, yes. When a user tried to connect to WVD, it first talked to Azure AD, Azure Active Directory, sorry. So Microsoft Identity Service. That's the first step. Then the second step, it will get authenticated with your own AD, and that's where you would be hosting and managing their permissions. So, and it's also where the container technology, which is FX Logic, which is a third-party technology that Microsoft bought because it was better than their own. So everything that the end user needs, so their desktop configuration, their local files, their permissions to access the file that's in the file service and so on, will be hosted in your environment. So it's not going to be pre-deployed exactly as they need, but obviously as a manager, as administrator of those environments, that's where you will come in and shine, because that's what your customer will expect for the end users, and that's what you'll be able to deliver using WVD and maybe Nerdio at first if you want to slowly get in the bath.
Awesome. So there is a question about Nerdio again. So does the Nerdio offering add to the cost?
There is indeed a cost for Nerdio. So it's a you could call it a Nerdio account. So it's a per user per month, depending on if you go with their professional or enterprise. There's a third offering, which is called Core, but this one allows you mostly to deploy virtual machines without much configuration on them. But so there's a cost depending on which features that your customers will need. At the same time, Nerdio will provide you for easy management of those customers. So if you're looking for you could say a more generic management offering, then Nerdio is something that you should bundle into your offering. At the same time, let's face it, it will reduce a little bit of your margin. So that's why we're saying that Nerdio is great. It's great for a lot of partners that want to start. It's great for easy deployment of very standard environment. But at the same time, as you know, the more automated and the easier the things are, that's usually where you make less money. Like nobody makes a fortune selling the Office suite because there's no technical skills required in deploying and maintaining this. While the Azure is the opposite. That's where there's a lot of money to be made around the management. Nerdio makes that a little bit easier, but obviously there's a cost to that.
Awesome. I got a question from Mike. How do you integrate on-prem storage for something like a multi-function, like scanning or another core system that is not Azure-based?
Yes, and that's an interesting question, because Microsoft a month ago or so made release a public preview of their universal print service. So it's something that you'll be able to leverage in Azure. So that way you won't have to deploy, let's say, or install a print service on their Active Directory and then manage the driver, which is usually the more complicated, or I would say the part that gives a lot of headaches to partners, because of all of the large number of the large variety of different drivers that might be required. So it's a new service. Obviously, like a little bit like WVD, it's probably not completely polished yet, but that is one option that would be that will be available fairly soon from Microsoft. Otherwise, as mentioned, there is the good old print server that you can simply install on the Active Directory machine, for example, and through that VPN tunnel, the network printers will be able to talk to that service, and then obviously come back to the I should say the end user will be able to request a network printers to print something from them, and simply the request will simply go through the VPN tunnel and back, and then they will have their printing work done that way.
Awesome. So yeah, I got one more question, and this one is really kind of focusing on some people who are still on-prem, they're still running Windows 7. What is the additional benefit of or opportunity for MSPs who are dealing with clients who are running Windows 7 and who need to move to WVD?
Yes. Windows 7 is a little bit peculiar because it doesn't allow the option of a multi-user experience. So you're still limited to that VDI deployment type, so one end user per virtual machine. So it's not as useful, but at the same time, as Michael was mentioning at the beginning, you do get that 3 years extended support for the security patches and so on, which obviously you won't get if you go you can get that if you're still on-prem, but then there's a cost associated, and then you need to manage a lot of those activation keys and so on. So Windows 7 is useful for this. At the same time, it also allows you to use very large virtual machines running Windows 7 that you might not want to buy if you're on-prem. Especially if it's, let's say, temporary needs, or if it's just temporary needs for additional compute. So the flexibility of Azure is still available for Windows 7, and then you get to leverage the very robust architecture and infrastructure of Microsoft, of Azure, instead of your own. Now, obviously, I'm not downsizing or talking against the local deployment, but then again, very few providers can compare with Microsoft. Obviously, you have Google and AWS, but very few of them can at the same time can offer Windows 7 and then Windows 10 multi-user and WVD.
Awesome. Yeah, I thought that was the last one, but I got one more that just came in, and it's a really good question. So I just want to ask you this one. So how do we control the WVD usage costs? Some small customers are super sensitive to cost and keep comparing with traditional on-prem hardware costs, where the desktop can always be on.
Yes, definitely. As a solution architect, the main part is the scoping, because unlike on-prem, where normally you will evaluate their need and then evaluate their growth and then add some buffer, and then that's what you need to get. And then once you've paid for that, that's what you have, and you're stuck with it in a way. The advantage of any IaaS solution is always that you can start with as little as needed, but just enough to run the workload. You can adjust if there's a need. And compared to buying new hardware, even if it's just devices, that can be very useful, because if you don't need it after a certain time, you can simply decommission it in the cloud, which is very easy, and there's no string attached, there's no cost, unless obviously you went with reserve instances. So it's this whole conversation about, all right, what do you need, and what are your SLA requirements, and so on, and which is where you add your own value as a partner, obviously, but it's also where you can really maximize or optimize what you'll be deploying for them. So the compute, the backups, the networking, the DR solution, and etc. While the cost might appear to be about the same or more than what they would be using on locally on-prem, obviously then you get to benefit from the Microsoft architecture, which is fully redundant and quite resilient and so on. So there's definitely some very nice trade-off from going into the cloud compared to being on premises.
Awesome. I think also with WVD now, I think even with Nerdy, they're allowing you to, turn off the machines on certain hours and stuff like that, which can actually help saving with some cost savings as well too, right?
That's right. That's a good point. That was an element of the question that Azure Nerdio, you can implement schedules. So if some of your session hosts, which usually where most of the costs come from in an RDS environment, can be shut down. You can keep, let's say, a single one running 24/7, but the rest will only be running during your work work hours and so on. So there are ways to keep the cost down. You can go for reserve instances. So if you know that your workload is going to remain fairly stable for the next few years, then you can reserve those and you can buy the server licenses up front, for example. So there's a lot of cost saving there. And for a partner, it's quite easy to save in that money because of the saving that you get, and you can obviously make a margin out of that. So as you mentioned, that's a good way to keep the cost down. A lot of it is automated, so you don't have obviously to log in every night and shut down the virtual machines for your customers. So it's automated, and you only pay for what you use. So that's the beauty of the cloud.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's all the questions I have right now. I just want to let everybody know if you want any additional information about WVD, all you need to do is type in WVD in the question box or the chat box, and we'll definitely get back to you and with all the information that we have and answer any additional questions that you guys may need. So Mike, I'm going to turn it back to you to close off.
Excellent. So guys, thank you again so much for attending. This has been one of our webinars mainly concerned around the WVD opportunity for our partner network. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us via the website, via email, via phone call, via carrier pigeon, whatever you're using. We'd love to hear from you. We thank you again for your time. We know it's precious, and we hope you've gotten a lot of value out of this. As always, we welcome your feedback. Any questions, comments, or remarks, you can always email to us, and we'd love to hear from you. And we hope to hear from you guys soon. And we wish you a very good July 4th, and that everyone is safe at home and feeling good.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.